Hey all, Bynx here. Welcome to Bynx Bants, the weekly show where we talk about everything Marvel Snap, starting as always with our featured section. And this week, we're talking about 15 cards that have somehow never changed. We've talked about cards that have changed drastically. We've talked about cards that have been nerfed immediately. But it's really interesting to think back at cards that have never had a single buff or nerf for the entirety of the time that they've been in Marvel Snap. What I did is I looked through a list of every single card that's ever come out and tried to just pinpoint ones that were really interesting that they've never changed, especially ones that have been like meta relevant essentially the entire time they've been around. I think it's super, super fascinating. There was even some that really surprised me. Kind of broke it up into two different sections. First, we're going to talk about cards that came out in the original version of the Marvel Snap beta and have never had a single change, starting with the one that's kind of the most shocking, which is Iron Man. The 5 energy, 0 power ongoing. Your total power here is doubled. Crazy, crazy impactful effect. One of the most insane things to copy and use to just kind of overcome powers that you wouldn't normally expect to be able to do. It's been in so many different decks from ongoing stuff. It's been an absolute staple in Tribunal. It's never seen a single change. And honestly, there's never really been a reason to change this card. I think that it's just like a pure kind of like cornerstone of Marvel Snap is that Iron Man is this 5-0. Really, really interesting. Like it was one that I always point to and I knew, but the more I think about it, like this effect is crazy. It's on a giant card. Snap has changed so drastically from when this card was first released to now. And it's essentially been a meta relevant card the entire time. Really, really well designed. And I really think it's like a cornerstone of how they design the game of Marvel Snap is around Iron Man that's never changed. And again, crazy to be able to double things. And you'd think that, you know, when that's happening, it's pretty easy to want to change it or adjust it. But then we go into the next card, which is Wong, which has also never seen any changes. 4 energy, 2 power ongoing. Your on reveal abilities here happen twice. All the way back in beta, I was doing crazy game breaking stuff with Wong and copying it. There's been some adjustments to how Wong like doubles, but it's all been like bug fixes. Like really early on, Odin used to not double the card, like when Odin would retrigger cards twice, it wouldn't make those cards retrigger twice. So Odin didn't used to really work with Wong. And then the way that they changed both Onslaught as well as Mystique to work kind of like also goes in with Wong about how it's not able to double like crazy, because if you used to have 2 onslaughts on a lane with Wong using Mystique, you would get 256 on reveal triggers, which is simply too much. It's simply too many on reveal triggers. So kind of funny that they changed that. Also, I might have been a part of changing that from doing a giant stream right before launch, kind of highlighting all these crazy things that you can do with Wand, Mystique, and Onslaught. But nuts that this card has never seen any changes. Now, Wong is much less meta relevant than it was earlier on in Snap's lifetime. But any like Wong is always a card that you think about when any on reveal comes around, because you know playing Wong and then an on reveal in Odin triggers that card so many times that this crazy effect that has never been adjusted is just kind of always there at your disposal. So really crazy that both Wong and Iron Man, high cost cards with really crazy game changing abilities, have just been able to stay in their exact state throughout the entirety of Marvel Snap. Moving on, we have Brood, another card that has just never changed. 3 energy, 2 power on reveal. Add 2 Broodlings here with the same power. This card was not really seen at all until Silver Surfer came onto the scene. So it kind of like the early, like the first year in beta and then right after launch, Brood hadn't really seen any play. But then ever since Silver Surfer's been around, this card's basically been a meta staple. Galactic came around and kind of Brood's weirdly been like the reason a bunch of cards have gotten changed and nerfed. Like Forge went down to a 1 cost at one point, or a 2/1 that gave +3 at one point. which had to get changed because of Brood. Galacta, like Brood was probably a big reason why Galacta couldn't really stay at +3, being able to triple that. But interestingly, Brood has just held itself down as a 3-2, and I don't really think it's a card that needs adjusting. But a card, we have 2 cards that can triple something's power. This one can or 2 cards that can double power. This one can technically triple power. It's been the cause of a lot of cards being balanced around it, but no changes. Mr. Sinister, also same thing. Has never really seen any changes. Not being at the 3-cost spot is why I didn't include it on the list, because Brood is definitely just one of those cards that you've seen a ton of. If you've ever played Marvel Snap, and has never been nerfed, never been buffed. It's just always been Brood. Moving on here, we have one that's not very meta relevant, but was also like a crazy powerful effect. Morph, the 3 energy 0 power on reveal, become a copy of a card in your opponent's hand. Never changed this card. I was kind of surprised to see that too, because for a reason in my mind, I thought that Morph certainly has changed at some point or had something done to it. Nope. It's been the 3-0 hanging out in your collection. There has been a few times where Morph has like dabbled in meta relevance, especially when like Hela was really popular and everyone just had all these giant cards in their hand. Maybe right now Morph might be something that you might want to think about. It's kind of like a copycat that you can't really rely upon. But really interesting to see Morph completely never changed, never adjusted, has never been a problem. I wonder if they'll ever, maybe make Morph like a 2-cost. Making Morph a 2-0 could be kind of interesting. Maybe it sees a little bit more play. But I think that that's kind of the style of card that they don't want to be strong. Morph's definitely more a fun card. Moving on, we have Magento. Never, ever changed. Has been a staple 6-drop. It's really fallen off, I would say, the last year, especially when like Scream first came around and those kind of movement decks were originally using Magento, and then it kind of just tapered off and didn't really see too much play with that deck even. And now you really don't see this card at all. I still like to bring it back every now and again. I think that it can do some really, really cool, disruptive things, especially when people aren't expecting it, because people are never expecting Magento to come down. But crazy. This card was the same power as Hulk for a really long time. Now Hulk is 614, but it was always kind of weird because like Hulk and this card were the same, and like this card can technically be a downside. Like sometimes you play Magento and it loses you the game, but usually it is a massive positive. So maybe now that Hulk's went up to 14, this card has not really been meta relevant for a while. Maybe we see it get adjusted. Maybe it ticks up to like 613 or something. But for a card that was really one of the most played 6-drops, I would say, for like the first 2 or 3 years of the game, the fact that this card was never a huge problem, it was just kind of like this big boss card that you could play to control the final turns of the game, and has never seen any adjustment up or down, that was really, really interesting. Next up, we have Goose. Goose was really surprising to me. I thought when I saw this card, I was like, has Goose ever been changed? And no, I looked up the history. It has been a 2-2 with the ongoing nobody can play cards that cost 4, 5, or 6 here. And now I do think that they will change Goose, and I think a lot of these cards that are like limited to 1 through 6 costs now, like things like Foom are just so much more popular now. Zombie Galacti, Weapon H, we just have so many more bigger cost cards that, saying 4 or more or 3 or less as opposed to 1, 2, and 3 or 4, 5, and 6, I imagine is kind of an inevitability as they continue spreading things out. So this might be the last time we can talk about Goose as a card that's never changed, but like Goose is very rarely seen play. You've seen a little bit of play in Surfer. Obviously, Cerebro 2 is a great spot for Goose. But outside of that, not really. But it is a pretty devastating effect that no one can play 4, 5, or 6 cost cards here. Really, really strong controlling effect that just never really had too many great places. But again, the fact that this card has never gone up or down in cost or value or never changed how it works, and has just always been available for you to play ever since the very beginning of Marvel Snap, I thought was super, super fascinating. And hopefully we do get a change in Goose and they start thinking about it. Maybe they change its power. Who knows? Cerebro 2 isn't real anymore ever since they changed Storm. So no need to keep Goose there. They even got rid of freaking Nightcrawler, man. Moving on, we have another card that's crazy. It's never been changed. Carnage. One of the absolute core staple destroy cards up until Fastball Special came out. This was the go-to fastest way to be able to destroy cards with an on-reveal effect. 2 energy, 2 power on reveal. Destroy your other cards here, plus 2 power for each destroyed. Not many of you were playing back in the very early beta days where I first played Marvel Snap, but Carnage was actually one of the absolute best cards in the game because Nova used to give plus 2 power when you destroyed it. So the power level was so shrunk down back then. Most of the people playing weren't even getting access to Series 3 cards. There was like a few Series 3 cards that were going in, but it was like just Series 1 and Series 2 mostly, and then a spattering whenever you'd get them. And Carnage was just an absolute powerhouse back then and has been meta relevant from day one, has never been changed, never been adjusted. And honestly, I don't think it ever has needed to. There's actually a lot of destroy cards I can put onto this list. Deadpool was one that I thought about, but Deadpool, they did actually change early on that Deadpool's cost wouldn't get adjusted. So that was more of a gameplay change, but Deadpool has pretty much been the same like ever since. And there's a couple other destroy cards that we'll talk about. Venom actually used to be a 3-1, which is kind of wild. And they moved it up to a 3-3, and I think that's a really, really good spot. That happened a long time ago. But destroy has also kind of been like this cornerstone archetype. It almost feels like there's a bunch of cards that will even see ahead that are destroy cards, and they are kind of like what the meta is built around. So really crazy Carnage that on release was one of the strongest cards in the game, has been seen play in meta relevant decks for the entirety of the 3+ years it's been around. And I've never even heard anyone say that this card should get nerfed, which I think is really cool. Like early on, people were saying that when Nova was going, but we didn't even know what the heck was going on back then. But to have Carnage, like a core component to one of like the staple archetypes, be the same forever, super duper interesting. The last two that we're going to talk about in beta, we do have to put an asterisk on, but I do think that they still qualify for what we're looking at here. The first one being Cosmo. The 3 energy, 3 power ongoing, unreveals abilities won't happen here. Just a staple tech card that has seen play again from the very beginning of the game up until now. It is always a tech card that's available whenever on reveal decks are super, super prominent and you're trying to keep them in check. Cosmo is there and he has your back. So Cosmo did get changed one time when they had like the Techpocalypse nerf where they basically nerfed all of the tech cards. But that was only for 2 weeks. Then it came back to its original form and hasn't been changed since. So I do still count it on this. Like it was kind of like a temporary nerf that they did to this card when they moved it up to a 4/5. But Cosmo, of all these cards that I've talked about before, Cosmo is probably the one that at many points was talked about as a card that needed to get changed. Armor, I almost threw on here as well. Armor also has never been changed. 2/3 cards can't be destroyed here. Limiting it down to 15, armor didn't make the cut, but Cosmo has been talked about a lot as a card that's a little bit too powerful, and a lot of talk that happened, especially like 2 years ago when tech cards were so prevalent in the meta. But I never think Cosmo needed a change. I mean, you're taking a tempo loss to play Cosmo. It's a symmetric effect where it affects both you and your opponent, and you can actually use it as a way to get rid of bad on reveals for things like Sentry, which is not super used, but as a card that's just a way to shut down on reveal to be like an anti-tech card, to have this be a staple for so long and it never changed, I thought was really cool. And then the other one that did get changed in the Techpocalypse, but was reverted back to its original state and has been the same ever since, was Killmonger. Killmonger's crazy, man. The 3 energy, 3 power, on reveal, destroy all 1-cost cards. All of them, every single one. This card is crazy that it's never been changed. Like, it is such a game warping effect to delete like over, I gotta mention like 1 in 5 cards in the game are like 1 cost. I think 1 cost is the biggest amount that we have. So just being able to dust all of those cards with a single card and have it not change or go up and down in power for forever is wild. Killmonger was actually super interesting. Early on, it was a Series 3 card. And in the very early days of beta, like I said, people would get through Series 1 and 2. Card acquisition was so much more of a slog than it is now. If you're complaining about card acquisition now, honestly, valid, do your thing, but it was way worse back then. There was a problem because as like the main player base that started in the beta was getting into Series 3, whoever had access to Killmonger first, because Nova was so overpowered, was just way ahead of the curve. So what they actually did was they did a very early change from Killmonger, moving it from Series 3 down to Series 2. that all the beta players who were kind of at that level would have access to it to kind of even out the playing field. So an interesting change to Killmonger that happened back then, but never a nerf or a buff. And again, this card is less meta relevant now than it ever has been. Like, really, at this point, Killmonger is like only played in destroy style decks. But Killmonger was a great tech card when Zoo was around, and even just when certain one costs were so prevalent. Killmonger has always been kind of like a backup plan. I still think that this card should get played more in Surfer. I remember I played a Surfer deck with Killmonger, and it won me like 4 games because no one respects this card, and no one thinks that if you're not playing Destroyed, you can play this. But you can play it. You can play it in any deck. It's a crazy, insane effect. It's been the same forever outside of that little 2-week window where it got changed in the Techpocalypse. And it's just so interesting to have a game warping card like this. Just, I don't know, never see any changes. This one has probably gotten the most hate, even more than Cosmo, I would say, for cards that maybe should have been changed or adjusted at some point. I definitely think it's fine where it is now. Honestly, maybe it's getting to the point where it could get a little bit of a buff. They've even brought cards in like Kyera that are kind of like directly made as a counter to this card to stop all of your one costs from getting destroyed. But super interesting card. Really crazy that it's never been changed. Game warping card that's just been the same forever since the very first day of Marvel Snap. Moving on, we're going to be talking about cards that weren't available in the very first part of the beta, but were really impactful cards and have been impactful forever and it came in later. And again, I was surprised some of these have never made a change. The first one's Null. Talk about destroy cards. Null has a crazy effect. It is the combined power of all cards destroyed this game. It's a 6/0. And it's just been the same ever since it's been released. This really shocked me. I was like, for sure, Null has had a change at some point. I was going through all the lists, and no, it hasn't changed. There was some changes with how it updated its power in hand, which is still kind of weird and works in funky ways. But the fact that Null is this huge boss card for destroy with such a variable power, like you'd think that maybe it would get knocked up or down at some point. Nope. It's just been the exact same forever, and it's been a meta-relevant part of Destroy forever and has never seen any changes. Absolutely crazy. I don't know if maybe like giving it more power would make the card feel less bad, because really the only really terrible time it is to go against Null right now is when it's on against Mr. Negative and they're like playing a flipped version of it, Shang-Chiing you, and then Zoling it. So maybe even like adding power to Null would make the card feel less bad, which is crazy to say. But super game warping effect and has never seen a change since release. It's been a staple ever since. Moving on with Madam Web. Move has been this like problem archetype for so long. They've made such sweeping changes to Human Torch and all these different things that they've adjusted up and down. But Move has always been good, and Madam Web is a crazy card. 2 energy, 1 power, ongoing. You can move one of your other cards away from here each turn. Remember when this card came out, everyone was like, oh, this card will surely get nerfed at some point. It's way too powerful. Here we are 2 years later. Madam Web the exact same and seeing a ton of play in multiple different styles of decks. I love running Madam Web in like move focus decks just to give you a way to move some things around. I really liked it in like Bast and Agent Venom style decks. I think it's a really cool inclusion in those, because not only you get a nice boost from Bast or Agent Venom, but being able to reposition and move your cards around is really valuable. And outside of that first couple months when Madam Web came out, no one really talks about nerfing this card, and I think for good reason. I like these big, powerful staple effects that different archetypes have. And I think that they kind of hit the nail on the head for how to balance this card right from the get-go, because, outside of those first couple of months, it's never really been the problem with Move. It's never been something that people talk about that needs to get changed with Move. It's just kind of like this staple tool that Move has that is fine, and it is very good, and it's going to be used anytime, or almost anytime you're going to be playing Move. So this card has been super meta relevant from the moment it's been released, sometimes in the best deck in the game and always in relevant decks. Never a single change. Very interesting. Moving on, we have Nebula. This one's a bit more of a like pet card for me, because maybe you don't see Nebula as much anymore. But Nebula, the 1 energy, 1 power. Each turn your opponent doesn't play a card here, +2 power, except the turn you play this. I think this card is super underrated. I still use it way more probably than like anyone else. I I have such a love for this card in how it controls like your opponent's plays and how they have to play, because every single turn they have to think about, okay, well, I don't want to play in the Nebula lane, but can I afford to give it 2 more power? Sometimes it gives some weird things, especially when Killmonger was much more relevant, because they would just ignore it and then kill it at the very end of the game, and that would suck. But I think that Nebula just is a 1-drop that you can play down confidently on turn 1. And then not only does it, kind of spiral out of control if your opponent doesn't do anything to it and just kind of lets it grow, but it also allows you as a player to know where your opponent's going to play more likely than not, to give you better ways to call out and play around them. So Nebula, this was a card I remember when this card got released. I was like, this card will for sure get a nerf, because it was so strong when it got released and was still very strong for like the first year. And now it's kind of slowly tapered off. Not many 1-drops are just played for their pure power, outside of things that are just like 4 power whenever you play them, like Black Cat and like Hydra Bob. But man, Nebula, a card that I was so sure was going to get changed at some point, has just been there forever, and it's still there if you're still looking to play it. This is a pretty darn good card, man. Don't count it out. Next up, we have Dakin. This one really surprised me too, because Dakin came out. It was really underperforming when it came out. It really took Bullseye coming into the picture for Dakin to truly take off. But the entire time that Dakin was around, it was never adjusted, never changed, never buffed. Like, I don't know. I think early on, I was kind of surprised it didn't get buffed. And then when that Bullseye deck was everywhere, that deck was really hard to beat. Kind of surprised that card never got like taken a peek at there and maybe like adjusted so that like that version of it was a bit worse. Nope. Dakin has been a 3/4 that adds the Maramasa shard to your hand, and when you destroy or discard that card, it's going to double Dakin's power. Super interesting, powerful effect. Again, these doubling effects are really crazy. It's always so surprising to see that these cards that can change the game so widely have just been fine for so long. Like, I don't think Dakin's in a bad spot. There's still people who are crazy about playing like Dakin Zola decks religiously on ladder. It's like consistently one of the most played decks at the top of ladder. Shout out to a few players who do that. I don't want to call anyone by name, but there are some people who play this way too much. And I think it's a really powerful effect, a really cool card, and was super surprised to see that it's just never gotten moved up or down. Moving on to the final 2 cards, and these are 2 of my absolute favorite cards in the game, and again, just shocking that they've never changed. Kate Bishop, 2 energy, 3 power, add 2 arrows to your hand. The reason I'm most surprised about this card and the next card we're going to talk about is how many ways that you could nerf this card. You could nerf any individual arrow. You could nerf how the arrows come into your hand. Like if you get like a specific 2 or a set of a certain 2 to not get a combination that's too terribly strong. But yeah, you can adjust the power level of each of the individual arrows up and down. But this card has just never seen any changes. This was another card that when it came out, I was like, for sure, this card will get nerfed. So powerful. It's a cheap, easy to play card. Gets you small resources that you can squeeze into your curve and help things out. And boy, oh boy, it's just never been that big of a problem. When I did the best season pass cards from every year, the reason why I didn't give this card an honorable mention in the year that it came out is for that reason, the fact that the card has never gotten nerfed. So how can I really sit here and say it's the most powerful card when every other card on the list had gotten nerfed at some point? They were just really hit the nail on the head. I do still think that like there's an argument that Acid Arrow should be -1 or even 0. But I will say, man, like Kate Bishop, again, another card that I love playing. There's so many different ways that you can adjust this card's power level to make it a little bit stronger, much more than just a normal card. But because there's that added layer to it, you can adjust just one of the arrows a little bit to knock it down. You can adjust one of the arrows a little bit up. But nope, Kate Bishop's been perfect forever. I love her. And it's really awesome that she's never seen a change. And a very similar card to Kate Bishop that had the same thing, Nico. Nico's never been changed. This was probably the biggest surprise, because when I clicked on Nico, I literally went through every single spell to make sure none of the spells had gotten changed, because I was like, surely when Nico was just popping off and everywhere, especially the first year when she came out, surely something would have gotten changed. There's 7 freaking spells you can look at. There's 7 different spells. So, like, surely one of those spells has been adjusted in some way, slightly small adjustment. Nope, it's been the exact same the entire time. Nico and Kate Bishop are, I think, two of the best designed cards in the game that give you extra value than you normally get in a card with less consistency because you don't know exactly what you're going to get. But all of these spells and all of the arrows just kind of work in a way that you can always find some way to use them. They're super, super skill expressive cards. I think that Nico took me a really long time to come around to because I'm very impatient when it comes to just about any video game, but Marvel Snap in particular. I'm a very tempo focused player. I like to play things out. Maybe that's why I hate Star-Lord. But Nico being one of those cards that you sometimes just have to patiently wait and just hope that the right spell flips and not just take value immediately when you can is super, super skill expressive and how to use it in different matchups in different decks. Tons of different ways to play this card, and Nico has been an absolute staple one drop from the moment it came into the game. And I don't even think it's had, like, Kate Bishop has had like kind of ebbs and flows as far as how much it's played. Nico's maybe had like one little ebb, but in general, this is just a premier one drop to add to any deck. There's so many ways that they can adjust it to make it slightly better or slightly worse, and they've never had to because we love you, Nico. Well, I hope that you love talking about these 15 cards that have somehow never made any changes in Marvel Snap. Let's start talking about Marvel Snap today. We have a brand new card to talk about, Kraglin. And we're going to talk about Drax, the Avatar of Life, as well as Major Victory from last week. A little bit of news and updates, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about Marvel Snap Overexplained, my other series that I have been running that I think is really, really beneficial if you're trying to get better at Marvel Snap. Let's talk about Kraglin here. So this is going to be the brand new card coming out tomorrow. 3 energy, 3 power with a very long on reveal. Banish the top card of your deck. One thing I do just want to point out, and I point this out all the time, do not worry about banishing the top card of your deck. I think that people see that and they think like, oh, that is bad. I'm not getting access to that card I'm banishing. When you are looking at a deck of cards that you are drawing cards off of, burning one of those cards doesn't really do anything. You can just imagine in your mind that that card was actually just the bottom card of your deck that you weren't going to draw anyway. So banishing that card is actually sometimes a benefit. I tend to think it's a benefit. It does give your opponent information on a resource that you won't have available to you, but it actually does make your draws more consistent because you're taking one card out of the deck. So you know that there's only going to be 2 left of what's left there. So you actually have a higher chance of drawing those cards and you can plan out your turns a little bit better. So just remember, banishing the own card, top card of your deck is almost never a downside, and it's almost always like net positive, if not neutral as an effect. So don't get worried about that part of it. But it is something that can move up and down because if the card is 4 cost or higher, you get +2 energy next turn, or it just gets +4 power. Now, I've been back and forth on this card. I'm not exactly sure how strong this card will be. But one thing I do know pretty strongly is that you're not really going to want to be playing this card in a deck where there's going to be like the same amount of chance of getting a 4 or higher cost card or a 3 or lower cost card. You're most likely going to be like pushing into one of those styles and having your card be really low curve so that you're always getting the +4 power, or have it be really high curve where you're almost always hitting the +2 energy. And I think that the +2 energy is definitely something that is a lot more interesting than the +4 power, because there's way more ways to get 3/7s and way better ways to get 3/7s, like just playing things like speed or Jesus, Drax, the Avatar of Life, will pretty much always give you a 3/7, usually a 3/10, sometimes a 3/13. You're never really going to be playing this card where you're just banishing the top card of your deck and getting a 3/7. But I think that most of the decks that are going to be trying this card out will have very, very few cards that are 4 cost or lower. Maybe there's some inclination that this could work in Star-Lord. I don't really buy that personally. Really, I think that this card is kind of a Galactus card in many ways, because going from 3 energy, gaining 2 on turn 4, it gets you to 6 energy without having to play Wave, which can not only get countered by Mobius, but also gives your opponent the ability to play one of their giant cards. Fin Fang Foom is played in a ton of decks. When you're playing Wave, very often you're giving your opponent access to a card much cheaper than they normally have. So I think that there's 2 situations where this card might find some level of play. One is going to be in like Galactus focus decks. I think that this card is something that you can definitely consider as an alternative to wave to play down Galactus on turn 4. You're probably just going to have to adjust the cost of your deck and have very few other cards that are 3 or less power. Probably just wave and like maybe an Electro or one other card that's under 4 costs. So you're very consistently hitting the +2 energy. Or maybe there's going to be some kind of setup where there's really really high power cards and you want a wave style effect, and you just want to get the chance to have this give you like a wave level effect of playing a 6 cost early and ramping it out. I really don't see this card being super super impactful in the meta, especially not right now. Maybe after Star-Lord's nerf there's a little bit. If there's anything that this card is going to fit into right when it releases, it's going to be like a counter Star-Lord all-in Galactus style deck. I think might enjoy having this card. But I really don't think that this is a card that you need in your collection. Pretty much there's multiple different ways to get this effect. It is unique to just get 2 energy from a single card without having to do anything else. Is like one of the first times you've been able to do that. Even like Star-Lord, you have to float the energy. But an interesting card to look at. I wouldn't give it my seal of approval. I don't think it's going to see very much play. Now let's talk about the cards that came out last week, starting with Drax, Avatar of Life. 3 energy, 4 power with the crazy ability, end of turn, +3 power if your opponent played a card with greater power this turn. Move to that card if you'd be winning its location. If you are thinking about passing on Drax and you have the means to get Drax, hear my words right now. I think that this is legitimately one of the best cards in the game. This card is absolutely diabolically powerful from the perspective of just playing it out and getting like a 310 super, super consistently, and sometimes getting a 313. But the jumping effect to win locations, it hadn't happened too terribly much playing the card, but I was playing like a Scream deck today, and I think it won me like 4 different games where I literally like threw my hands. I was like, we lost. And then Drax just like, I got you, bro. I'm winning this. Really, really interesting. There is some like level of randomness to if it will actually jump and which card it will look at if there are multiple cards that were bigger than it played on that turn. But this card is an absolute powerhouse. If you were thinking about passing on this card, mark my words, you will absolutely regret it. It doesn't fit into too many things right now because the meta is so warped around Star-Lord Master of the Sun. But once a nerf comes into Star-Lord Master of the Sun, I promise you that this card is going to be really, really good. I actually remember after I did my video for this card, I was super high and I thought the card was crazy. I went over to Dexter's stream. We love Dexter, who was playing it and just kept saying this card is mid. I don't really like what I'm doing with this card. Doesn't seem very good right now. I think this card is very passable. It's mid. And I said something that I think is, I still really believe it. I think it is impossible that this card is bad. It is literally impossible that Drax Avatar of Life is a bad card. Its floor is a good card. Its ceiling is a absolute meta staple. Get your hands on this card. You will start seeing it everywhere once Star-Lord goes down, and you're not going to want to miss out. Unbelievably powerful card. Moving on to Major Victory, that is not a very strong card. The 3 energy, 4 power. Says on reveal, add 2 members of the Guardians crew to your hand. This takes the original Guardians that came out with the game. So you have Mantis, Rocket Raccoon, the original Star-Lord, Drax, Groot, and Gamora. And playing this card, it just felt not good. Yeah, I thought that would be kind of cool to have like a consistent 2 cards that you get and like the pool of cards that you're going to get. But man, if it's so different like playing Major Victory and getting like Drax Gamora versus playing this card and getting Rocket Raccoon Mantis. And you can't plan for it until you actually play it and get the cards in your hand. I was playing it in a like Vic Hand style deck. I was also messing around with the new Infinity Ultron. They just upgraded a bunch of things with it. But Major Victory just felt fine. Like it felt pretty cool. It's nice to be able to play some of those old Guardians. It's nice to have them like a little box that you can put into your deck as opposed to having to put them into your deck and take up a whole deck slot. Now you have like a deck that maybe you just don't do too much on 3. You have this to load up and give you some options for later on. A fun card. It's really nice that everyone has access to get it for free and a fun thing to mess around with. I also saw a lot of people saying like, oh, it was a huge fumble. I think I saw, I gotta stay off the subreddit. people were saying it's a huge fumble that this card doesn't give you access to the new Guardians. It was so stupid of Second Dinner to do that. I think that's a ridiculous way of looking at this card. I don't think that every card has to be as strong as Shu Lao or Star-Lord Master of the Sun that comes out. I think that this card is fun. It's cool to get access to Guardians. It's like decent. It's not great, but like a draft style format, I tell you what, I would not mind this card. In like a vacuum, it's like a pretty solid card. But I really think that the idea of this card is to bring the soul of the original Guardians and have a card that you can still play those cards, not just having to jump back and play a card that came out 3.5 years ago. Whereas if this had access to like Drax Avatar of Life and Star-Lord and everything like that, like boy, oh boy, man, this card would be crazy toxic. So I like what they did with it. I think it's a fun card. Hopefully you were able to get access to it for free. But if you don't and you missed out on it, definitely not something you need to add to your collection, just for having a little bit of fun. And speaking of Major Victor, we do have Grand Arena still going. I kind of jokingly put these two Star-Lord Master of the Sun because he's everywhere in that. They did go with the custom decks this time, so it's not all pre-built. It is custom. One thing I definitely want to say to Second Dinner is I really love this idea, and I bring this up maybe like the third time on Bynx Bants. I really like the idea of having when it's going to be Grand Arena, have the first half of Grand Arena be pre-con, and then halfway through open it up to custom decks. Because what's happened with Grand Arena, what's happened with these ones that come back, like the first time things like this come out or limited time modes like this come out, is really exciting and people will tend to play it all the way through. But after it comes back for like the second or third time, people usually jump in, get the rewards they want first couple of days, and then you don't really see anyone playing it for the rest of it. Now, maybe that's me being someone who's a content creator and doesn't really like playing it that much. Maybe it is me just loving like the main focus of the game. Maybe this is something that casual players really like, to just have these alternative game modes to be able to go in and play. But I think if their goal is to make the game mode exciting throughout the entirety of the week that it's available, having some change that happens halfway through, I think would be really, really good in getting people to want to come back. Like, play with the precons for a little bit, have some fun messing around with the precons and try out like the new skills or the changes that they've made to the champions. And then halfway through opening up the floodgates and having people try and make their own decks after like some early precon meta change. Then the meta would rapidly evolve with all the custom cards coming out. And you wouldn't like go into the new game mode and then just see Star-Lord every game, which tended to be what was happening, especially with the extra energy that you're getting available in that mode. So Grand Arena, definitely go and make sure you get your Major Victory. Even though it's not that great of a card, always being able to get a card for free is wonderful. And give it a chance if you haven't already. And then one last thing to touch on here today, just want to shout out again my Overexplained series. If you were trying to get better at Marvel Snap, I'm really, really proud of the series. I think that it is a great lesson for me to get better at the game. And hopefully it's helping teach people a cool way of thinking about Marvel Snap. And I just want to address a couple comments that I got for this one coming out, saying like, oh, why would you do an Overexplain for this like brain dead deck that it doesn't take any skill to play? Like, why are you like worrying about like teaching someone how to play this deck? The deck just runs itself. I think that having that attitude for a deck that is just too strong and feels very hard to beat is going to be one of the best ways that you can completely limit yourself in growing and getting better as a Marvel Snap player. I think that when you just sit back and say, woe is me, this deck is garbage, everyone who plays it is bad, they're just, carried by this deck, oh, they're abusing Star-Lord. I think that's really, really unfair. Marvel Snap is a beautiful game that does not have solitaire decks. Every single deck, you have to choose where you play your locations. You have to adapt to the different locations that come in every individual game. And you have to play your game plan as things happen, and as things sometimes completely warp the field. So I do think that it's really important to think about how to play these decks and how to play these very powerful decks so that you can learn to beat them. I talked about a lot in the intro of this, learning how to beat a deck like Star-Lord. If you're just like saying it's just unbeatable and way too broken and there's nothing nothing I could do, dude, there's nothing I could do, you're really limiting yourself. And I think that finding ways to creep up and beat out these super powerful decks is some of the most satisfying wins that you can get in all of playing Marvel Snap that I've played. And hopefully you can find that there too. So if you wanted to see me take on this deck and try and explain a lot of the thought process of playing it as optimally as possible, to then take that information and crush Star-Lord on ladder, definitely go and check out Marvel Snap Overexplained. And thank you so much for watching, Bynx Bants. I really, really like making these. Make sure to leave a comment. Send some likes my way. Let me know if there's any other things. I am getting a running list of ideas for these early parts of it, the featured sections. So I actually do have a running list now that I'm using. I was kind of just going on the fly. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know down in the comments below. You might see it in a future Bynx Bants. I hope that you enjoyed and can you hear it? Oh, it's the freaking song. It's beautiful. See you in the next one. See ya.
Bynx, Bynx, Bynx. I hope you like the vibe. Bynx, Bynx. Like and subscribe. Bynx, Bynx. I hope you like the vibe. Bynx, Bynx. Like and subscribe.